Holy shit, we are back here at Bench Talk again. I did not think I'd actually manage to do another episode, but here we are. And don't get excited on me, but we're going to talk about rifle builds. This is probably the biggest question that I get asked on Instagram, via email, personal guys in my life, coworkers, buddies, shit like that, talking about rifle builds and asking, my opinion on that. This whole thing comes down to opinion. That it is across the board. I don't care who says what. There's no way. There's not one way to go about this. There's 1,000 ways to skin a cat. You can walk into a situation with a rifle setup that you prefer, and someone may look at you and think you're crazy. But that's what you prefer, and that's what it needs to be. This is a complete preference thing for you if you're trying to buy or build a rifle setup that's to impress other guys. You're going to end up with something that's completely useless to you. Great reference. I go shoot at my local range a lot, and I was at my local range not too long ago, and I ended up coming across two separate guys. One guy had a beautiful, brand new 7mm PRC from Snowy Mountain Rifles. Beautiful gun. I've seen a handful of their work, and Snowy Mountain Rifles seems to do a really good job. The rifle that he had was, I think it was their action or whatever action they were using. It was a custom Remington 700 clone. It was a custom carbon fiber stock, and it had a custom carbon fiber barrel. And I believe it was topped with a Night Force scope, and it was either an ATACR or an NX8. Guy was super nice. Shooting this rifle next to me. Clearly, he didn't seem to like he was having a good time. Right, it's always pretty easy to spot at a shooting bench at a range if someone's having a shitty day, especially someone with a rifle that cost, I don't know, probably somewhere in the ballpark of $7 to $10 grand. It was very apparent he wasn't having a good day. He was just the next bench over, and so I ended up, chatting with him a bit. And he was a guy that was out here for work, and but he lived, I want to say Oklahoma. But he had a bunch of buddies that go hunting over in Montana, and so he got talked into building or buying this rifle. And, the latest and greatest cartridge, right? It's the 7 PRC by Hornady. And he was shooting this gun, and, you can, if you're not familiar with Snowy Mountain Rifles, and I don't know when they started doing this, because I don't think it was like this always, but I could be wrong. Snowy Mountain Rifles is basically like a turnkey rifle system, just like Gunworks. Right, so and I'm sure this is something you can get with them. I'm sure it's something they can exclude, but with his rifle, they had already worked up hand loads for it. So he was shooting the, I think they were 190 grain burgers at 3,000 feet a second out of a 24-inch barrel or a 22-inch barrel. Very impressive, and a lot of recoil. Basically, this guy's shooting the gun next to me, can't get it to group, and he's moving the elevation turret, shit's not working, and I was just like, hey man, what's going on? He explained it, and I was like, hey, I'd be more than willing to help you if you're okay with me shooting your rifle. And he's like, yeah, no problem. So I do a quick 3-shot group. The rifle's actually zeroed, which is great. And I print, probably a half-inch group at 100 yards, 3 shots, and that rifle kicked like a son of a bitch. I didn't want to shoot any more shots than 3. That rifle, like no joke, couldn't have weighed more than 8 pounds. But it was beautiful, felt great, but god damn, that was a lot of recoil. So, talking to that guy, I'm like, hey man, do you think that you are going to be able to shoot this rifle, comfortably? And, he gave a very honest answer of like, I don't know, but I'm going to try. And I was like, okay, hey, no problem at all. For him, in that situation, it was worth it for him to spend X amount of money to get this custom rifle, which kind of seemed like it was too much rifle, but for him, that's what he wanted. And so I helped the guy, he finished up his range session after that, and he went on to go do whatever. Very nice guy. I hope he has success with his hunt in Montana that he was talking about doing for 2025. I ended up seeing another gentleman maybe a month or two before that, and we were at another range. Guy was shooting basically walking up to the target, making comments about when we were all downrange, making comments about like couldn't get the gun to group or something like that. And so I was like, man, I was like, it's unfortunately, it's got to be you. It's not the rifle. I saw the rifle he was shooting, and it was a Gunworks, and it was a Gunworks 7 PRC, beautiful rifle, all carbon fiber, carbon fiber stock, carbon fiber barrel. He had, I believe it was a Nightforce NX8 on it, and he had like one of the nice, I think it was either, it was one of the lightweight bipods, but beautiful rifle. It looked like it was set up for someone who was going to go do a Dall sheep hunt, right? Ultra lightweight, long range capable, very impressive rifle system. And this guy, I start chatting with him, briefly, and we start bullshitting back and forth, and he's like, oh yeah, I'm sure, the whatever's going on is, him, it's, not the rifle. And I was like, oh yeah, hey, your rifle's beautiful. What hunt do you have going up? I was pretty aware that he most likely had a very big hunt coming up, right? Went and bought this rifle, and he ended up saying that they were doing some out-of-state hunt, and I was like, oh, okay. And I was like, I think it was for elk or mule deer. But I was like, well, and I was like, I'm sure you're going to find success. They keeps going to the guide, and I was like, yep. And I was like, I'm sure you're going to find success, and I'm sure if you can see it, you're probably going to be able to shoot it with that rifle. And just again, me assuming that this guy probably had some type of long-range training or experience going over the fact that he had this really expensive rifle system. Completely wrong. And right when you assume, you make an ass out of you and me, and I assumed that was the case with him, and I was completely wrong. And he was like, oh no, and he was like, man, I'll be lucky if I take a 300-yard shot. And I was like, wow. In my head, I was like, wow, poor rifle, right, isn't going to get used for, what it was intended for. Does it matter? No, it doesn't. Who cares? If you want a $10,000 rifle to shoot 200 yards, who cares? More power to you. But, I feel like there's enough people in the industry now that make it so common to have custom rifles that normal people feel like this is the way to go. This is how I'm successful hunting. I need to go get a custom rifle. And maybe that's the case. Maybe it's not for some people. I never didn't ask that guy why he went and bought a Gunworks rifle. But what I will say is that, if that would have been my buddy, and I would have gotten asked, like, hey man, I'm looking to go on an out-of-state mule deer hunt. Guide saying shots are going to be 200 to 300 yards, and I need a rifle that's capable of doing that. What would you recommend? And, there'd be a lot more questions to follow up on, like, hey, is this just a hunting rifle? Do you have a budget? Do you care what the rifle's like? And when I mean, do you care what the rifle's like, does it have to feel really nice in your hand? Do you care if it feels kind of cheap? Do you care if the action's smooth or not? Do you care if the action feels like it's gritty? Does that matter to you? Does it matter if it's a 90-degree bolt throw? Or do you want a 60-degree bolt throw? Do you care if it's a long-action cartridge or a short-action cartridge? There's a lot of questions that go involved with that. But if I had a friend who was like, hey, dude, give me a gun that'll be 200 to 300 yards, good. I can shoot an elk. I can shoot whatever I want. Dude, I'd pick any Ruger American in whatever caliber that he thought was convenient for him to buy factory ammunition. In reality, you could shoot, I'd say, just about anything. I wouldn't shoot an elk with a 223. But shit, I killed my elk in 2023 with a 243 Ackley at, 400 yards, and it wasn't some crazy shot. It was a double-lunged shot. There are plenty of other guys that I know who kill elk with 243s within a couple hundred yards. 308, 6.5 Creedmoor, 6 Creedmoor. Right? If you really wanted a Magnum, or if you wanted to go, old school boomer, and you wanted a 270 or a 30-06 or a 25-06, you could do anything. It really doesn't matter. And so that's the thing that's kind of frustrating talking to people is when it comes up with this, there's so many things that go into this, capability of the rifle, what you actually need, what's worth your investment. Putting this, financial burden on yourself to buy this. Do you actually need it? Do you not? And that's what, we're going to kind of discuss. At the end of the day, and just like as a reference for anyone, right? At the end of the day, we can, buy a $10,000 rifle that's capable of shooting a, half-minute group at, 1,000 yards. But do you, as the shooter, have the capability to actually make that shot repeatedly? Can you actually do that? Do you know how to read wind? Are you aware, when you're proning out, if you're level or not? Do you understand if you're not level and you're canted, that's going to affect your, bullet's flight of travel? There's a lot of things to think about. So with that, I do think it's very important that we're honest and we say that, hey, along with picking a rifle system, kind of investing in yourself, training for long-range shooting, or taking a beginning long-range shooting course, if that's something you want, I think would be highly beneficial. I will say that even myself, and I'm nothing special, I'm not. I'm just someone who's been shooting and hunting for a very long time. I was very confident, going out, hey, I can hit a steel plate at 500-600 yards, with my buddies, out in BLM or National Forest. And I thought that was fine up until I actually went and took a long-range shooting course. I took one that was west of Sacramento, just by a little bit. I think it's called Esparto, if I'm not mistaken. The course I took was with Mark Zork out of his Instagram name is West Coast Long Range. He puts on a bunch of different courses. I ended up taking one of his hunter courses, which was really cool. But I learned a ton of shit, like a lot. And so at the time, it didn't really matter what rifle system I showed up with. There was a lot of stuff just going off the get-go that I learned, which was wildly beneficial. Something that, and this is kind of just a funny story where, I'm sure some guys are going to laugh at this, but I was just an idiot at one point in life. I ended up buying at one point a Leopold Mark VI. I think it's like 3.5 or 3.2x by 18 by 44 millimeter. It was a contract scope for the U.S. government. I have no idea how someone got a hold of it, but it ended up on eBay. And I think in like 2019 or something like that, I ended up picking up this scope. And I picked up this scope when I had bought my first, when I did my first rifle build. So when I, did my first little custom 243 Winchester, I bought this scope. And it was a nice scope. It was Mills, which kind of sucked because I really only use MOA. It was Mills, but I got it for a really good deal, like $1,200. And the scope was lightweight, which was great. It was basically, almost 8 ounces lighter than any of the Mark V HDs that are out right now, which is awesome. So this scope came in at like 23 ounces. The current Mark Vs, the 5 to 25 by 56s that I primarily use, come in at 30 ounces right now. So having this lightweight scope that was capable of dialing out, it was a second or first focal plane, it was great. And it had a good reticle. So I bought it, and one of the things that I noticed when I bought a couple Mark Vs is when I was comparing them, I was like, oh wow, I don't think the reticle on the Mark VI is that sharp. And I just got this like notion in my head that the reticle wasn't sharp, the Mark Vs were really sharp. So I ended up selling that scope. And I kind of kicked myself in the ass for that for years, because for a backpacking rifle, it would be, definitely beneficial to have a scope like that was very capable, that was an extra 8 ounces lighter. And it's like impossible to find now. So I show up to Mark's course, and within like the first 5 minutes, he's talking about how to focus your reticle on your scope. And I am like amazed, and I'm like, he's talking about the parallax. And Mark's like, no. We're not talking about the parallax. And he was like, zoom your scope out all the way, regardless, what power you have. Zoom your scope out all the way, set your parallax to like 100, and point your rifle, right? Your rifle's clear, but point your rifle at the sky where you have no background, and your basically eye is going to focus on to the reticle, and you can use, basically there's a focus ring on the front objective that you look through on your optic. There's on almost all of them, there's like a little focus ring. Well, that little focus ring helps you focus the reticle. And so basically, Mark advised like, hey, go like where it's way out of focus and then bring it back into focus, and that will help a lot. And I immediately was like, holy fuck, I just sold a scope that, I bought for $1,200, but was a scope that now on the street, these things are selling for like $2,300, $2,400 now because no one can get them. And I'm like, motherfucker, I sold that scope because I didn't know how to focus the fucking reticle. And that's crazy. That's like wildly embarrassing that I didn't know that. Um, but just to give reference, like that was a great thing to learn. And I was very, very grateful that I would never, ever make some stupid mistake like that again. So some things come up. Again, though, I would highly recommend taking a long-range shooting course for anyone, along with investing time in making or building a custom rifle or buying a custom rifle. Would highly recommend that you also invest time and money into yourself for training. It's super, super beneficial. And, along with that, to further training like myself, and Mark was a great guy. If anyone's in the Central Coast area, I'd highly recommend going to Mark's class, or one of them. He has many different ones, but I'd highly recommend it. He's a great dude, and he's a professional PRS shooter. But one of the things Mark was very honest about with the guys that went through the class with me in I think it was 2023, was really honest, was like, hey, you guys came through the shooting course, did well. Our entire group that we shot with shot pretty well. And he was like, hey, for anyone who wants to further themselves in this long-range shooting stuff, I'd highly recommend you just come and start shooting PRS matches. And for me, the local matches up there, it's 2 hours for me to drive up to the range, but it's a $50 fee, and I get to shoot, anywhere between 80 to 100 rounds on, these sets of Corsa Fire. The guys are super, super nice, and every single time I go out, I learn something new. So I'd highly recommend that as well. It's a great way if you do go take a class, go shoot some of your local PRS matches or National Rifle League matches if they have some, whatever it would be for a long-range shooting course in your area. Just to get out and just put some rounds on a rifle, get some rounds down range, and just stay sharp. I think that's wildly beneficial. So I can get off my tangent on that. Let's go back to custom rifles. I just want to put that out there prior to us getting into this. When we're looking at custom rifles, I'd say the two groups we're going to look at are custom rifles and then what people consider semi-custom. If you hear that term, normally semi-custom is someone referring to a factory Remington 700 or it's a factory rifle that has been stripped down, rebarreled, and done to whatever, but they'll call it semi-custom versus a true custom rifle, saying that you have a custom aftermarket action. I think it's stupid. I just say custom rifles across the board. If you take a Remington 700 receiver that's a factory one and you take it off and have someone blueprint it and true it up, and you're spending that money to have that done on it, I consider, hey, that is a custom action. You're customizing it. Other people are going to say I'm wrong. I really don't care. Just so you're aware if you hear that nomenclature when you're talking about it. There's kind of two ways to go about this when you're looking at doing it, or I guess three. So you can either buy a custom rifle, right? There are tons of manufacturers out there that sell custom rifles that you can buy, out of, I guess Unknown Munitions out of Oregon, right? You can buy custom rifles from them, or I take that back, out of Idaho. Unknown Munitions, you can do, like I mentioned earlier, Snowy Mountain Rifles, Gunworks, like Seekins Havoc, right? There's a bunch of custom ones. I would definitely, and I'm not going to go into why, stay away from manufacturers that may sound like Christensen. I would just stay away from that. But do your research if you're going to end up buying one of these factory custom rifle options. Just do your research, see what it's about, and you need to look at other options as well of hey, if you're planning on trying to go this way, is that receiver that they're using actually a Remington 700 footprint, and does it take the same tenon? So when I rebarrel it, can I use a Remage prefit? So one of the Savage style prefit barrels with a barrel nut, can I use that on that receiver when I burn this barrel out? Can I not? Or if you're never planning on rebarreling that rifle, then it doesn't matter, right? These are things that if it matters to you, great. If it doesn't, don't even worry about it. If you're not going to rebarrel it, who gives a shit? But these are just things to think about if you're looking down the road. I had a couple coworkers, within the past year were like, hey, I want to get into hunting. I may want to get into long-range shooting. I may go way deep down the rabbit hole. What would you recommend for an introduction rifle? And I got both of them to buy Tikka T3 Lite 6.5 PRCs. Both guys love them, so which is great. And, it's like, hey, right, Tikkas are held to a high enough tolerance that you can actually get pre-shouldered, pre-fit barrels for them, which is awesome. Proof Research, you can buy them directly from Proof. And some other companies make pre-fit barrels as well, but just some forethought into it. And it was, hey, here are the options. This is what we went with. So you can either buy one, you can build one. You can actually build one yourself by buying like plug-and-play parts. So you would buy a Remington 700 clone receiver. So like, again, we talked about this in the last podcast, but like Defiance, right? The all the Bighorn actions, the Impact 737s or 787 or the other one they make, Warwick Tactical, Curtis Customs, Kelby, right? There's a bajillion of these manufacturers, and when you look at them, you look at, hey, what prefit barrels do these things take? Do they take shouldered prefits? So, it basically you just put it on and torque it and it's head spaced. Or do you have to put on a shouldered prefit barrel? So basically like a Savage, where it has a barrel nut that you have to put on and you actually have to head space the receiver with headspace gauges inside the chamber. It's like a little thing you have to do. So you'd spin the barrel on, you'd put a headspace gauge in the chamber, close the bolt. Normally you're taking out the firing pin, you're taking out the ejector and the M16 style extractor, which normally they have. You're removing all that stuff so the bolt is naked, so there's no resistance. You, put in the, normally I put in a go gauge, and basically I'll tighten down the barrel to where I can't turn it anymore, back it off, a little bit of a turn, and you're looking to see if your bolt will fall. Or if there's any resistance, you want to make sure there's no resistance on the bolt. When there's no resistance on the bolt, you'll swap to the no-go gauge. And basically, that should be tight enough in the chamber that it is not going to engage the cam over of the bolt. Which, it's not a very hard process. There are YouTube videos on it. With that, you will need a barrel vise. You will need an action wrench. You will need headspace gauges. And you're going to need to, be willing to take apart your bolts to do this. But you can. You can do this yourself. You can't do it for financial gain. You can't do it for someone else. But you can do it yourself, and it is illegal without a federal firearms license. When you start doing work for other people or you start doing it for financial gain, that's when this whole thing turns into like, oh no, I need a federal firearms license. So you can do plug-and-play parts, your choice. Or you can have a gunsmith assemble it. So like, let's say, hey, I have grandpa's old Winchester Model 70 and I want to get it rebarreled. We can go through and we can send it off, basically take the entire rifle and send it to a gunsmith, and they're going to buy a barrel. They're going to thread it for that receiver. They're going to take apart, all the parts that you gave them, pull the barrel off the receiver, take it out of the stock. They're probably going to have to do some type of truing for this action, right? Because this would be a factory action. And they will end up putting the barrel on, and they'll chamber it, and they'll make sure it headspace is good, and they'll send it back to you, and you pay for all of that. So like the going rate for a chamber job normally is in the ballpark of like $450 to $600, and normally that it may or may not include some type of truing to the receiver, and that's so these guys, right, can make sure that this rifle shoots good. You can also buy all custom parts and still send it off and have a gunsmith put it together. So if I'm, dead set that I want a Bartlein barrel on an Impact 737 action, I can do that, and I can call a gunsmith and say, hey, I'm going to send you, or I want a competition rifle that's in a Manor stock. I want one of the ones, the mini chassis inside or whatever. And, it needs to take AIC mags. It's going to be, this barrel length, this barrel contour. I want a Bartlein barrel. I want, an Impact 737 stock. I want a, Timney trigger or whatever you're going to want and all this shit. And they can slam it all together and you're going to pay for it. Right, there's going to be a large convenience fee on top of that, but you can pay to play. That is totally a thing. So, right, either buy one from someone who's making basically factory, custom rifles. You can buy your own parts and assemble it yourself. or either take a rifle and have it the barrel swapped out and do a barrel job, or buy the parts and send it off to a gunsmith and have them assemble it. You can do all those things. Right, and the cheapest option is going to be you doing the plug and play parts. That's going to be the cheapest option all the way. But again, it comes down to, hey, do I want to pay this and have someone else do it, or do I actually have the time to go and do this myself? And then when you're looking at, hey, am I going to do a full custom where I have a custom Remington 700 clone or a custom action, or am I going to do, a factory option? The one thing I will say, and I said it in the last podcast, is that a lot of if you're very much so focused on like, hey, I want the smoothest action, I want this thing to, be like a Cadillac, I would highly recommend looking at a fully custom receiver. It is very rare that you have a factory action that you pay to have, gone through by a gunsmith, that it comes out being the same, at least in my opinion. Just the other day, Aero Precision, if you're on their little mailing list for emails, they just sent out an email to everyone a couple days ago saying, hey, we have Aero Solus barreled actions. They had 2 options. One was or I guess they had 4. They had 4 technically. They had 2 options that were Solus barreled actions. One was like an 18-inch 308. One was a 20 or 22-inch 6.5 Creedmoor. Both barrels were fluted. They did say they were blems, and I don't know what they meant by blem. It did say that, hey, the firearms are working perfectly, but they will have some cosmetic wear, which I'm guessing is probably going to be a Cerakote issue. And they were selling those barreled actions. They just needed a trigger and a stock. They were selling those for $550. So you could get a Solus custom action, which is a lower end custom action, but it's still a custom action. You could get a custom action with a barrel that was fully chambered, everything ready to go, for $550. And they were saying if for an extra $100, they would throw in a Trigger Tech trigger. And it was just, the Trigger Tech primary trigger, but still, at that point, all you need is a stock. So for $650, you have a barreled action, and for another $350, you can buy a KRG Bravo chassis, and you would have a complete rifle for under $1,000 with a custom action. Which I would highly recommend over someone doing what I did, like buying Howa 1500s and paying a bunch of money to have them done up. I would highly recommend doing the custom action if you can afford it. And if you can't, I would say save and wait. I'm not saying, don't get involved in hunting, but if you already have a hunting rifle and you're like, hey, I really want a custom one, you're kind of like going at it where you really, really want one, I would just say, hey, use the rifle you have and wait. Unless you have the ability to, buy once, cry once. So getting back into the topics that I think at least are kind of my important touching points, right? We went over the parts, kind of the options, the path you can go. What is the rifle used for? Is it going to be used for hunting? Is it used for target practice? Is it used for both? What's that capability? And what are your expectations for that rifle? So if, someone's buying a straight up hunting rifle, right? Lightweight barrels, pencil barrels, carbon fiber barrels, lightweight, all that stuff makes sense, right? You're not worried about doing multiple shots, the stringing of your groups as a barrel heats up, right? Which is a common thing if you buy a pencil barrel. Multiple shot strings, the steel heats up and you start to walk shots. That's kind of like a very common concept. That's why when you see F-class shooters, their barrels are normally like unturned, inch 250 or larger. And the whole thing is, right, they're not inducing stress into the steel. That's why they want the fattest barrel they can. It also aids in the harmonics. But, big, stiff, thick barrels hold accuracy. That's why competition shooters shoot thicker barrels. Now, some people who want to try to get around that, have a thicker barrel that, has good harmonics, doesn't, flex a ton, have tried carbon fiber barrels. I don't have enough experience to really speak on if they work or not. I've got a couple. They shoot great. I've, had one that didn't shoot great, but I just think it was a bad barrel. I have nothing against carbon fiber. I don't. I think that if you do, your rifle build correctly, you can, kind of stick with steel, and that's kind of what I've just been doing because it's they're expensive. An extra $400 or $500 to, lose a pound or something. I'm not sure. For me, it's always worth it. Maybe at some point it will be. But again, that's all personal preference. So if the rifle is used for, target use, or if you want it with, both capabilities, it'd probably be, you need to focus more on probably having a heavier rifle than a lighter rifle if you're thinking of using it for hunting and target practice. For reference, right? At the time when I was starting to get into target-ish shooting, my kind of go-to build was just a Mac Brothers Action, a KRG Bravo chassis. And the chassis are easy. The KRGs are really affordable. They, don't require a bottom metal. They take AIC mags, which is great. Good feeding. Like, there's no issues with them. A Mac Brothers Action and a KRG Bravo chassis. And then I just went and got a pre-fit barrel, a Remage style MTU contour, basically inch. Technically, it's like an inch and 10,000ths, and it's like basically straight to the muzzle. I think the muzzle finishes off at right around an inch, maybe a little less, but it's threaded 5/8 by 24 for a muzzle brake. And this was my compromise to having a rifle that I could go target shooting with along with hunting. And that, again, personal preference, right? With that rifle with a Mark V Leopold, 5-25 by 56 on top, weighs about 14 pounds. I was okay hiking around with that rifle. I still am. That's the rifle I'm going to be using in a week or so in B-Zone. But some people aren't okay with that. Some people think that I'm crazy for hunting with a 14-pound rifle. And on the other side of the coin, a lot of the guys that I was shooting around at some of the PRS matches thought that I was crazy for shooting a 14-pound rifle because of how light it was compared to, the amount of guys who were shooting 25-pound rifles at these PRS matches. So it wasn't great for either realm, but it did okay in both. I like it as my hunting rifle. I prefer extra weight, and I like long barrels for the max velocity. But again, it's just personal preference, how I tried to beat the bug of doing both. But that's something you need to think about. And I mean, you can, it depends on what you want. Another one of my buddies did a pretty affordable build off of a Remington 700 SPS. It was their heavy barrel 6.5 Creedmoor. He ended up buying a KRG. It's not the Bravo. It's the I believe it might be the Whiskey. And anyways, he bought this chassis for the barreled action. He threw the barreled action in, and he didn't care if it was a smooth action. He didn't, he's just getting into long range shooting. But having something that was accurate, capable of like hopefully minute of angle accuracy, right, hold an inch at 100 yards, was kind of all he was hoping for. So we bought this. We threw it into a chassis, which was great. So now he could use removable AIC mags or P mags, whatever kind of he chose. He got to use factory ammo because he doesn't reload. I can reload for him for hunting ammunition, but he wanted to be able to buy factory ammunition. Okay, great. We have that check. And his barrel was heavy enough that he can go target shooting with that rifle. Can he go shoot a PRS match? Sure. Is that barrel going to get, heated up to a point that, may walk shots? It may, but does it matter? No, it doesn't. So him just having a heavier contour barrel helped a lot. And that was the easy medium. And that rifle actually shoots fantastic. The last time we went to the range, he shot with hand loads. He shot like a 1/2-inch 5-shot group at 100 yards with a second focal plane Leopold VX3. It's actually, funny enough, it's a VX3 Varmint Hunter reticle that I talked about. It was one of the very first scopes that I ever purchased. Good buddy of mine wants to get his first rifle. I had that scope laying around, and I was like, this will be perfect. And he loves it. Rifle shoots great. So that worked out. So at least for him, that was another easy medium of being very cost effective, but having something that was capable of, hey, I want to go out and shoot long distance along with something that he can take hunting. And then when we're, kind of getting way deep into this, if you're going to choose to do this, right, think caliber, use. Are you going to use factory ammunition? Do you hand load? And a lot of that does affect the rest of the conversation, right? If you are going to use factory ammunition, Are you in a communist state like the state of California where you have to use non-lead copper ammunition, or are you in another state like the rest of free America and can you use copper and lead projectiles to harvest game animals? If you are right in the state of California and you have to shoot copper, you need to plan, hey, does someone make copper ammunition that I can use? And then, right, you should deep dive into what the realistic expectations are for that cartridge with that non-lead ammunition. When I say that, when you look at most non-lead ammunition manufacturers, they put in there where they have basically the threshold for the bullet mushrooming or still expanding. And, normally the threshold somewhere around like 2,000 feet per second for velocity. That's normally there, like 2,200 feet per second on some of the barns, I think. But normally it's around that ballpark. But if you're planning on shooting something, you should research that. Like, my buddies who built 6.5 PRCs for out here, they shot factory ammunition. I knew they were going to shoot factory ammunition. The very first thing they went and bought were the Barnes, whatever the Barnes hunting bullets are, or ammunition, and it came with the 127 grain LRX bullet. That's a 6.5 millimeter projectile, or 264. And, that was easy. We immediately knew they could buy that. Very easy to find ammunition. Lots of people shoot it. And that's immediately what they went with. Both the 6.5 PRCs that were purchased, we made sure had the correct twist rate to shoot that bullet. And right, that's the planning that needs to go into it. And, if they go anywhere out of state, right, they can shoot just normal 6.5 PRC ammunition, whether it's, 130 grain or 135, 140, 147 grain. None of that crap matters, right? But we're in a state that restricts the bullets or projectiles that we can use for hunting. You need to factor that in. And if you're not in a state that requires any weird ammunition requirements for like non-lead projectiles, then have at. And at that point, you're picking something that's based off the capability you want, along with ammunition and reloading components availability. Those are kind of the things that I'll mainly look at. Hey, how easy is it for me to get ammunition? How expensive is ammunition? How expensive the ammunition that I realistically want to run. And right, I'm a huge hand loader, so normally I don't look at ammunition at all. So I normally look at like, hey, what reloading components do they have for this caliber? And if they don't have reloading components for it that are good, can I make components out of other reloading components to give me good brass? Great example. For my 243 Ackley, I wanted to shoot small rifle primer brass so that I could focus on getting right max velocity. I want the highest pressures and I want the best brass. I want to maximize what I'm getting out of that cartridge. So I primarily shoot Alpha Munitions 260 Remington small rifle primer brass. And I just neck it down to 243 Winchester and I fire form it in my chamber, and that's how I get my brass. I can't go out and buy 243 Ackley brass. So these are just things to keep in mind, things to think about when you're looking at getting into a caliber. Hey, if I want to reload for this, can I? Is it worth it? Am I going to find good brass? Am I not? If I had some caliber in mind that I could only get, Winchester brass, which is normally a very soft brass, that's kind of just like the going thing. And it's always been that way from my understanding. Winchester brass is very soft. If I was going to plan on loading a cartridge and using that brass, I probably wouldn't do it. And that's my opinion. I probably would skip that. I'm looking for, hey, does Lapua make brass for it? Does Norma? Does Peterson? Does Alpha Munitions? Does ADG? And that's kind of what I'm looking at. Now, granted, for 223, I do run Starline brass. I've run Starline brass in 243 Winchester with great results. I've shot some of my Ackley stuff. I've done it with Starline, but as it sits currently, normally I'm running other brands besides that. But looking at the availability of brass is great. Right, hey, does it have small rifle primer or large rifle primer brass? Can you get both for it, or is it just one? This could affect you if you're, in a drought of primers, right? Which we went through this massive scare through 2024 and 2023 and previous years for reloading components. It's been pretty crappy since probably, 2020. maybe 2021. But these are all things to think about, and they're things that you don't want after the fact to be, ooh, shit, I wish I would have thought of that. Like, hey, what powders can I use in this cartridge? Is it a large enough case that I can use, a lot of powders? Can I get away with using a slow magnum powder like 243 Winchester, a large enough case that even for just a standard 243 load, you can get away with using magnum powders, which are pretty cheap, pretty affordable to find. Is it going to be a match load that's, has an extreme spread of 7? No, it's not. But is it something that, hey, I want to go out and plink and, this is cheap powder, I have cheap bullets? Yes. And there are plenty of people who do that. There's nothing wrong with that at all. There's a dude I know over in the valley who, and I'm sure he's going to realize who I'm talking about as soon as he hears this. He's out killing coyotes, and that guy kills more fucking coyotes than anyone I know here in the California area. And he's out using a 240 Weatherby Magnum, and he's shooting like the cheapest 100 grain soft nose bullets you can. And who cares? He doesn't need a custom rifle. He's not shooting a custom rifle, not shooting these crazy loads with bullets with these crazy high BCs, but he kills shit like a motherfucker. And that's another great, thing to keep in mind. If it doesn't matter, who cares? I grew up in Central California. One of my neighbors that I grew up with, who's still around, grew up with as a kid, huge avid hunter. And man, he killed shit with basically any ammunition that was like rolling around in the truck. And you walked into his house and he has, I think, at least 8 mule deer from Idaho that are all, 30 plus inches. I think one of them's close to 37. Huge bucks. And if you start talking about rifles and reloading and ammunition, none of that stuff matters. It doesn't. He just gets shit killed with whatever he has. So for some people this matters, for some people it doesn't. Just right. Again, performance expectations and, does this really matter? Does it not? Right. This is a big undertaking. If you're getting into the whole reloading space, it is. It's a big undertaking, but none of it is anything that you have to do. You don't. It's something that I honestly kind of deter people from doing because it's something that I'm doing as a hobby. I really wouldn't recommend doing it unless for some reason you are really into this, because it is a lot financially and it's a lot of time. With you checking, powders, right? Also projectiles. Hey, what's going on with bullets in whatever caliber I'm picking to choose? This last few years, handful of, people that I follow throughout Instagram and shit, end up picking up, 22 caliber cartridges for match shooting because at the time the bullets were so much cheaper than like 6mm bullets. And that was driving like 22 Creedmoors, 22 GTs, 22 by 47 Lapuas, 22 XCs, right? A bunch of different calibers. And it's not, some massive thing that's being, happening across the shooting industry, but at least, watching a handful of guys switching to 22 caliber cartridges just because the bullets were so cheap. You could get 88 grain ELDMs that have a BC of, basically, I think it's 0.55 is their G1 BC. So it's greater than the 105 burgers. But you can get those 88 grain ELDMs for 20 cents a pop for a few years going into this whole like epidemic with ammunition and reloading components and stuff. So it made sense. Why not? If you're buying, the 105 burgers for $50 per box of 100, but you can switch to a different caliber and shoot basically a bullet that has a very, very similar BC, and you can, shoot the shit out of that and get, as good barrel life or better, less recoil. Why not? So you see people make changes like that in the industry when component availability is a huge topic. And then again, right, if you're, doing something like in California where you need non-lead projectiles, you should check and see what non-lead projectile you're going to run. Make sure you know the barrel twist that you need to run that projectile. Or, hey, if I buy this is the barrel twist I have. What bullets am I capable of shooting with that barrel twist? That is very, very important to understand. Right, because you may have a 7mm rem mag that has a 1 in 9.5 twist barrel, and it's kind of like, ooh, I want to make this a 1,000-yard gun, but how the fuck am I going to shoot that distance if I can't stabilize the heavy for caliber bullets that have the really high BC value that I need to shoot out to 1,000 yards? It makes things complicated. And, sometimes it works and you find a bullet that has a high BC value that, you can shoot and is good long-range capable bullet. Sometimes you can't. Or other times you move to a different venue. For example, right? I mentioned McGuire Ballistics the last time that I did the podcast. A bullet that he has, which is super cool, and it's cool because with the area that I grew up in, 25-06 was pretty common. He has a 95 grain 257 caliber copper rose monolithic copper bullet, and it's a 95 grain bullet. I can't remember what the BC value is, but guys are shooting them out of a 25-06 at like 3,600 feet per second, and I'm pretty sure the BC value is pretty good. It's somewhere in the ballpark of anywhere between 0.4 and 0.5. So that, for example, right, like if you had an older 25-06 and you wanted to make it a very long-range capable caliber, right, start shopping around for modern bullets and using modern powders, and that rifle makes it a very capable long-range cartridge versus, using a bunch of the standard lead core copper plated bullets that are out right now for the 257 calibers that are lower BC, or unfortunately a lot of the ones that are out right now that are higher BC, like the 133 grain and 135 grain burgers, and then the 134 grain ELDMs. All of those require like a 1 in 7 or a 1 in 8 barrel twist. So that's very important to keep in mind as well. And while we're on the topic of 25 cals, another important thing to note and to think about is performance expectations. What are you actually expecting this cartridge to do? And people are going to be like, well, what does it have to do with 25 cals? Well, when the 25 Creedmoor came out, somewhere around like 2020 was when guys, at least I started seeing that guys were wildcatting it to a 25. I think one of the first ones you can look up on YouTube might have been 2018 or 2019, but a guy has a video up of, they called it the 250 Hillbilly, and it was the 25 Creedmoor, and they were shooting like 95 grain Sierra Match Kings, I think, or a 95 grain something. I thought it was a Sierra bullet, but basically shooting them at really high velocities to kill coyotes. And it did not take too long before, at that time, there was another company at the time, damn, I cannot remember their name. They made a 133 grain 25 cal bullet, and it was made by Sierra for them. And it basically looked like a tipped Match King. They were selling those for a while, and that was, then it got guys to get high fast twist barrels, and I think they were all shooting 1 in 7s. But they started getting a lot of followers, blackjack bullets. That's what the name was. So blackjack bullets, they had 133 grain blackjack or 131 grain. But it was made by Sierra, and they got a bunch of guys that were doing fast twist barrels on 25 Creedmoors, 25 by 47 Lapuas, 25 PRCs, 25 Psalms, 25 by 284. And more recently, there's actually been a handful of guys who are starting to bring back the 25 Super, or the 25 by 308, or 25, odd 8, Ackley improved, right? That's kind of coming back. And then West Texas Ordnance has also come out with the 25 Saw, which actually looks very cool. Anyways, the 25, when it first came out, when the 25 Creedmoor did, a lot of guys were claiming, like these crazy velocities. Like, hey, in a 20-inch barrel, I'm shooting these 131 grain aces from blackjack at like 3,000 feet a second out of a short barrel. And so it got me, even at the time, like very interested. They have a super high ballistic coefficient. And so it was like, wow, this might be a really good hunting round. This might be a really good target round. And as it caught on, like more and more popular through the competition realm, I ended up actually running into a couple guys at competitions, along with running into guys at the range. And everyone who shot a 25 cal, I always wanted to know, hey, what load are you shooting? What velocities are you getting? Like, are you getting any pressure indications? And the most people I've talked to, guys are like, yeah, I'm running, the one anywhere in the 130 range out of like a 24 or 26 inch barrel at like 2850. And I had a couple guys tell me like, hey, anything over that, I'm seeing pressure. Now, granted, can you have barrels that are faster than other barrels, same caliber, same cartridge? Absolutely. And it could range drastically from, anywhere from 100 to 150 feet per second difference. running in the exact same barrel length, which doesn't make sense, but it does happen. So, is it realistic that, yeah, hey, maybe there were some guys at the very beginning that were running just faster barrels, and they weren't getting pressured those velocities? Yes, totally capable. But for me at the time, when I was looking at doing a 25 Creedmoor, I wanted something for sure that I was able to get those bullets at 3,000 feet a second all day long. Doesn't matter if I'm running a 22-inch or a 26-inch barrel. I realistically didn't think that I could count on that, so I never did a 25 cal build. I am looking at doing one of the 25 saws, though. I am pretty interested in trying that. Or a 25, or basically a 25 caliber off of the Ackley case. So either a 25 by 243 Ackley, a 2508 Ackley improved, or a 25 by 260 Ackley improved, whatever you want to call it. I'd be interested in playing with that as well. I just feel like that case has a lot of horsepower behind it. So these are all things to think about. Like, hey, what's my performance expectations for the range? Is it got to be, I want to be able to hit something at 1,000 yards? Do I want the flattest shooting hunting caliber I can, 28 Nosler? Or something crazy? Do I want something short barrel that's still going to be very high velocity that I can use as a backpacking gun? Maybe like a 6 SAUM or the 6 UM, maybe a 6 PRC. Maybe you do a 243 Ackley. Maybe you do a short barreled 6mm Creedmoor, which some of the guys from Leopold just did recently and took it to Alaska and killed all kinds of shit with it, which is awesome. They're very capable cartridges. You just need to come up with what you want. That's pretty much it. You want to land on the range, and regardless what you have, be happy. It doesn't matter if someone else thinks your rifle's cool or not. You need to show up and be happy with what you're shooting. Be happy every single time you pull the trigger. That's my notion. I love going to the range. I love shooting all the rifles I have, and if I have a rifle that I don't like, it's a huge pain in the ass. It just stays in the safe and becomes a little safe queen, which no one likes at all. So these, in my opinion, are the things that you should look at if you're looking at trying to build a custom rifle. Should I get into it? Should I not? And if you're not sure about any of this stuff, I would highly recommend not diving in feet first. I would highly recommend it. It is a very, very, very expensive hobby. One of a good buddy of mine has now jumped into the custom rifle realm, but when he first got into hunting, him and his dad came to me, and his dad's in his 60s, but he's in his 20s, and they came to me and were like, "Hey man, we really want to start getting into hunting." His dad retired, and it was like, "We really want to start getting into hunting. Like, what should we buy as like a beginner hunting rifle?" And I had this conversation at the time, probably not as well put together, but I had this conversation with them at the time, and immediately it was like, yeah, hey, we're not going to fuck with reloading, we're not going to fuck with custom rifles, and we got down to like, hey, the best bet is why don't we just buy a Ruger American 243 Winchester, and at the time, he put a Meopta Optica 6 scope on the rifle. And that rifle shot great. I had a bunch of leftover factory 243 Winchester non-lead ammunition. Gave it all to them. They shot the shit out of the rifle. I think he killed his first buck with it. I think. But it didn't take long for them to be like, okay, hey, we're sold on this. Let's move to a custom rifle. Which is fine. They still have that gun. It wasn't a waste, right? It was a very useful tool to let them figure out what they wanted to do getting into hunting. And then the next thing was like, hey, we want to build a custom gun that we can use for elk, we can use for all kinds of other stuff. It's going to be a good rifle system, but like we want it to be nice. Like I want this to be a nice rifle, like one and done. And it was like, okay, well, hey, if we're going to do one and done, do you want a Magnum, whatever? And we settled on we did a Defiance Tenacity action that was nitrided, beautiful action, super, super nice. We ended up buying a Proof Research shouldered prefit barrel and 6.5 PRC. His action for that was a short action Magnum, and we threw it in a KRG chassis. It's not the Bravo and it's not the Whiskey. It's the other one. But we ended up throwing it in one of those chassis, and he loves it. And the gun shoots lights out. Like, I mean, quarter-inch groups at 100 yards. Like, it shoots awesome. And he loves the fuck out of that rifle. But that rifle goes in the back of work trucks. That rifle goes in side-by-sides. That thing goes everywhere. The last time I looked at it, it was covered in dirt. And he uses the crap out of it, which is great. Or he abuses the crap out of it. And like that was great. It makes him happy. He's stoked to have it. It was a cool thing for us because we got to slam it together ourselves. And he got to be there for the whole thing, right? I was basically showing him how to put this rifle together. And it was super fun. So, it's one of those things of like, what do you want? What do you need? And needs, unfortunately, probably are going to change, and you might have to purchase stuff twice. Just all things to keep in mind. And anyone who's been listening, who is into this, has built a rifle or anything like that, if you have any other suggestions, I would highly recommend just putting it in the comments. If there's something I missed or something you think I should touch on more, I'd be more than willing to. I'd also be more than willing to get a gunsmith on here and see what questions they have to add that are common ones they get, or mistakes guys make, things like that. But most importantly, go be safe, have fun with your guys' family. Hopefully, get out in the outdoors, go enjoy that. Get your kids into shooting, or go shooting and get into it yourself. God bless everyone, and feel free to go find me on Instagram under Bench Talk, also on Rock Slide under Bench Talk. And you can find us on Spotify or Apple Play under the Bench Talk podcast. Thank you guys very much. Oh, and then also, please feel free to go look at YouTube. We do have rifle builds up that I've actually done myself. I've gone through, we talk about, but there will be more rifle builds to come. Hopefully, 22 GT, a comp 708 Ackley improved, lightweight Ackley improved, and some other fun ones on the way. And for anyone else who's trying to get their rifle building on, please check out Precision Rifle Stuff and T3 Optics. I highly recommend using US-based businesses, and especially local ones. The company's ran by Michael, who's also a PRS shooter. They have some awesome stuff on their website. T3 Optics has a ton of tripods and bipod options out. He also sells all kinds of other stuff. I'd highly recommend going and purchasing with confidence through his company. You can go on Instagram and find him under PRSTF_shop or PRSTFshop.com. PRSTF.com or T3 Optics. I personally have 2 of their Dauntless bipods, which I really, really, really like. They have a much, much cheaper price tag than the double pull or triple pull Skypods from MDT, and they are awesome. I really, really do enjoy it. I'm also running his Trinity tripod, which is their basically pro PRS tripod. I use it for hunting along with whenever I actually go and shoot a match. We just came back from a hunting trip in Arizona where my buddy and his father both harvested cow elk. And I spent basically the entire 3 days that we were hunting in Arizona behind my Trinity tripod, and I cannot explain how useful it was being able to put my spotting scope and binoculars on that tripod on Arca mounts, which, funny enough, I also got from the PRS Stuff Shop. So if you guys need any optics, tripods, bipods, or any other shooting attachments, I would highly recommend going and checking to see if the PRS Stuff Shop has it before you try to purchase it anywhere else. Right, you have a choice where your money goes, and supporting local businesses is very, very important. I spend lots and lots of money at the PRS Stuff Shop, and I really appreciate all the great products and the great customer service that you get. Just know, if you call or message the company, you're going to be speaking directly with the owner, which is great. I would highly recommend and purchase with confidence. Thank you guys. Take care, and wait for the next episode. Appreciate it.